On a freezing December night in 1990, the Tiede family returned to their remote cabin in the mountains, expecting warmth, safety, and Christmas memories. Instead, they would walk straight into something right out of a nightmare. Two armed intruders were already inside this cabin, just laying in wait. What would unfold was a scene of gasoline, gunfire, and terror so brutal that even seasoned investigators would later recall this as one of the most horrific crimes in Utah history. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Now today we have a humdinger of a case, because let me tell you, oh my lord. But let me tell you, this case is absolutely horrifying. It is chilling to the bone, and that is the case of the Tiede family murders, also known as the Tiede cabin murders. This family were just wanting to enjoy their Christmas together, and the horror that they would endure is just unimaginable. Now, before we dive in, if you are new here, hi, my name is Anna. I am a certified yapper, okay? I said it. I like to talk. I could yap all day about true crime, and I decided I'm going to hop on the internet and I'm going to yap about true crime. And now, somehow, I find myself doing it twice a week, every single week on a Wednesday and Sunday. So, if true crime is your jam, I highly suggest you subscribe, get the notification bell on, because like I said, I'm here for you every single week, and it's free. Any details you need regarding me, myself and I, products used at my face today, my social media handles, they will all be listed down below. Any case suggestions you have can be left down below in the comments. I check them all, I write them all down on my big massive frickin' list that could probably span for decades at this point. And also, if you like some creepy content, I have some coming your way in the month of October on a Friday. Friday Night Fright, we're coming back. Anywho, I've already spoke enough, so without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the horrifying case of the Tiede family murders. So let's start off by setting the scene, shall we? Okay, let's get used to our surroundings. Let's get familiar. Oakley in 1990, this was the definition of small town rural America. I mean, the population at this point hovering under 900. That is very little people. And I hate to say something that's kind of cliche, but it really was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's names, faces, places, businesses, cars, business. It was tucked away in Camas Valley, and it sat around 45 miles east of Salt Lake City. Now, it was completely surrounded by the snowy landscapes of the Wasatch Mountains, and honestly, this was the kind of thing that looked like something out of a frickin' postcard or a horror movie. It really depends on your perspective. Now, one thing about Oakley, its winters, they weren't just cold, they were downright brutal. I mean, brutal weather conditions. Thick snow would blanket the whole town. The mountains, totally different story. This was feet. I genuinely just tried to say it was feet of snow. Foots of snow on the mountains? Foots. We'll go with foots. The temperatures would be below freezing, and then come night time they were even further below freezing. The roads that would lead out the valley, they were usually covered in slick black ice, which is so freaking dangerous. Black ice is probably the thing that terrifies me most in the winter, because you literally can't see it. Now, once you turned off the road and toward the cabins within the foothills, cars were no use. This is when you had to jump out of your car right onto a snowmobile. That is the only way you could climb up this mountain. And by doing this, this is where you would find the Tiede family cabin. Now, the Tiede family, for their cabin, they would park in this parking lot, sort of at the bottom of the slope. They would then hop on their snowmobiles and they would travel for around 2.5 miles, maybe slightly less, but roughly 2.5 miles up to the family cabin. And for many people, including the Tiede family, the serenity, the tranquility, the peace and calm that you would get due to the isolation, that was one of the most appealing aspects of the cabins up in the mountains. It was a perfect place to just bring your family, set up your Christmas traditions, maybe host a Christmas party like the Tiede family would. And whilst this isolation is lovely, whilst it has so many positives, This isolation could also be deadly, because God forbid anything happened, you are so far away from help. Now, the community of Oakley itself, it was pretty close-knit. Like I said, everyone knew everyone, businesses, everyone supported the locals. A lot of families who lived in Oakley, it was almost like generational. So that family would live, then their family would live there, and then their family would live there. A lot of them work in ranches, raising livestock, or even commuting to nearby towns for work. And the thing that was really good about this small community is the locals, they all looked out for each other. If anything seemed off, if anything seemed suspicious, they would alert each other. And let's say, for example, if anyone seen, a stranger lurking in the snowy mountains who didn't belong there, they would notice that right away. And eerily enough, just days before the Tiede family murders, there would be a stranger spotted lurking near their cabin. But when that stranger was approached and offered help, they would take off abruptly, disappearing into the woods, and that was really strange. And although this might seem like a warning sign to us when we can look back in hindsight, no one could have guessed what would happen as a result of this person in the woods. The Tiede family, they absolutely loved and adored their cabin up in the mountains. This is the place that held some of their most special memories, family Christmases, family parties. It was just this place of peace, happiness, memories, like I said, cherished times. And that is why this weekend in December of 1990, this family, they were so excited to return to their cabin, continue their traditions that they've spent years building. But all this safety and small town security that the Tiede family and the locals felt, this would be shattered on December the 22nd of 1990. Now, before we do dive into the horrifying events of December the 22nd, I think we need to meet the people who actually mean the most in this case, and that is the members of the Tiede family. So first up we have Rolf. He was the father of the family. He was 51 years old, and people would call him the anchor of the family. He was steady, he was dependable, and he was the kind of man who would handle the logistics. Like snow needs shovelled, Rolf's got it. A car needs sorted, don't worry, Rolf's got it. Your snowmobile's making a funny noise, don't worry, Rolf will check it. He was the one that kept the practical side of the cabin running smoothly every single year. Rolf was known to be very practical, very hardworking, very dependable, and above all, he was known to be incredibly protective of his friends, of his family, and he was so protective of his daughters. Rolf is described as being the kind of dad that he didn't really have to say much to reassure you. His presence alone was something that brought comfort and safety to many people, but specifically his wife and his daughters. The bond that he had with his wife, Kaye, was totally unbreakable. I mean, they balanced each other perfectly. It was clear that they were meant to be, they were soulmates, they were meant to be together in their lifetime. They perfectly balanced structure and warmth, giving their daughters both the stability and love that they needed in their lives. His daughters would say that he was a perfect mix of strength and then also gentle teasing. Like, he's the kind of dad that if you're out too late, he's going to let you know about it. But in the morning, all will be forgotten and he will be up at the crack of dawn showing you how to ride the snowmobile. There was never a grudge held, there was never silent treatment, there was never any love that had to be earned. He just loved unconditionally, regardless. Not that, staying out too late warrants a dad giving anyone the silent treatment, but you know what I mean. He's just the kind of dad that he wants to move past it. He doesn't want to keep an argument going for days on end. Then we have Kaye Tiede. Now, Kaye, she was 49 years old and she was described as being the heart of this family. People said that Kaye was a mother through and through. She radiated warmth, love, organisation, but she also had that gentle parenting style when it came to authority. It was authority that she would lay down that was enough that her daughters knew that they were safe and protected. Kaye was known to be the family planner. Anything that was taking place, Kaye was at the helm. She was planning it all, right down to the frosting on the cupcakes. She was truly the glue that held this family together, especially with her elderly mother living with them and being cared for. Now, regardless of how hectic life got, Kaye would always ensure that traditions were honoured, plans were met, and that everyone knew that they were loved. I'm so sorry, I'm getting so sidetracked by Lola. Connor and I, my boyfriend, we were watching his mum and dad's little dog, and she is the cutest little baby ever. I would try and get her on camera, but she's so comfy. You're comfy, aren't you? You're so comfy. Yes, you are. Connor's out tonight, so we are currently chilling together. Now, this cabin to Kaye, this was one of the most important places to her. It was a place where most of her happy memories had been built. She loved Christmas, she loved the holidays, and she just loved making new memories with her family every single year, for every occasion. Then we have Beth Potts, who was 76 years old at this time. Now, Beth, she was actually blind and also very immobile, which is why she was being cared for by the Tiede family. Now, sources say different things, right? Because the internet will be the internet and documentaries will be documentaries. But from what I've seen, I believe Beth, she had quite a few tragic things that happened within her life. I believe her first husband had passed away. She then remarried, and this husband actually died in a car accident that she was also in. But Beth would survive, but this is apparently the accident that left her very immobilised and also nearly completely blind. And although Beth did rely on her family for care and to help with her mobility, she was still sharp as a tack. And even though her physical health maybe wasn't the best, the fact that she got to spend time with her family every single day, the fact that she spent so much time with her granddaughters, that meant the world to her, and that almost overrode her ill physical health. Because whilst she might not be as active as she used to be, whilst her sight is badly compromised, she is with her family every single day, and that is all that mattered to her. It was stated by those that love Beth that she was just the warmth in this cabin. And you know what? Even if she couldn't cook, if she couldn't hang the decorations, she brought so much energy and so much love and care to this environment. And you might wonder, you know, was the relationship between Kaye and Beth strained because Kaye was her primary caregiver? The answer to that is no. Kaye loved the fact that she could look after her mum. She loved the fact that her mother was with her every day, and she was looking out for her mum as an act of love. It wasn't obligation. Kaye didn't feel like she had to do this. She wanted to do this. Now, Beth's granddaughters had stated that they loved having her around because, I mean, she just had so many memories, you know. She had all the family memories from when their mother was young, when their mother and father first got together. She was just like this wealth of knowledge about the family history. Then we have Linae Tiede, who was 20 years old at the time, so very much on the cusp of adulthood. I know 20 is an adult, but when I was 20, I was very much still a child in my eyes. She was balancing that line of independence and also family ties. She was mature, responsible, very much aware of the world. She would often play the role of protector and mentor to her younger sister Tricia, who was 16 at the time. And to Kaye and Rolf, Linae was someone that they could depend on, someone they could trust, someone they knew wanted to help with the errands or doing the chores. She was always there ready to help. If her grandmother needed some extra care, or if Kaye had to go out and she couldn't do something for Beth, Linae would step forward and she would do that, and again, out of love, not obligation. Linae's bond with Tricia was so incredibly strong. She was her protector. Like, she's going to shield you from pain, but she's also, you know, going to have a few digs, a couple of jabs, you know, maybe a cross word or two, the way that only an older sister can. And I speak from experience. And then we have 16-year-old Tricia Tiede. Now, she was the youngest. She was very vibrant. She was right smack bang in the middle of enjoying that teenage life where there's not really a care in the world, but there's also many cares in the world. She was bright, sensitive, full of potential, and she just adored her family, and she would lean on them, but in particular she would lean on Linae and also Kaye. They had a bond that I think every parent and daughter wishes they had. Tricia would also help out with her grandmother where she could. Whether it was small tasks, big tasks, she always approached it with love and empathy. Her relationship with Linae is that typical sister bond where the younger sister, they're annoyed by their older sister, but they're also going to ask to wear their clothes and borrow their shoes, or, you know, in my case, just go into my wardrobe and take my clothes and take my shoes and then act like she didn't. But, you know, that's sister things. And although I'm saying that there was times where she could be a bit annoyed by Linae, she also always looked up to her older sister. And I know I've already said it, but I just want to stress again that for the Tiede family, this cabin, it wasn't just a cabin they had, a cabin that they would retreat to. This was Christmas headquarters. I mean, they had it down to a fine art. The day that they would go, the day that the decorations were put up, what meals would be cooked and when presents would be opened, when other family members would arrive, when they would throw the Christmas party, the Christmas gathering. It was all planned. It was all meticulous. It was all a tradition that was so special to them. Kaye had named this cabin Tiede's Tranquility, and this was because of the serenity and peace that she felt while she was in this cabin. Every single December, no matter how busy life got, how hectic people's schedules were, they always penciled in their time at the cabin. It was their family ritual, it was their pause from the world, a chance for them to gather different generations under one roof and celebrate the holidays together. Now, this cabin was absolutely gorgeous. It's like dream location, dream cabin, dream layout. Picture a rustic, cosy, 2-storey that's built for warmth and not for show, and yet it still looks perfect. There was these wood panel walls, there was like this sturdy fireplace that you could just get so cozy in front of. I imagine it with like a hot chocolate, marshmallows, loads of whipped cream, cookies, all that jazz. And these windows, they were like photo frames that looked out to this white snow and pines everywhere. Honestly, it looks magical. Now, some people might think, you know, it's an awful lot of effort. If you're going to this cabin, you've got to park your car, you've got to hop in a snowmobile, you've got to go up to the cabin 2.5 miles, and you've got to take the food, the presents, your clothes, suitcases, everything, okay? You need to humph it all up this big mountain. But this family stated that this extra effort made it even more special. It's like you didn't just casually drop in, you arrive, like packed and present. Now, sometimes Kaye, she would go up to the cabin in advance to sort of like prepare. She wanted it to be like Christmas heaven when people walk through that door. So she was in charge of decorating, making sure that that cabin looked like Christmas threw up inside it in the best way possible. There was string lights everywhere, the stockings, they were hung on the fireplace. They had evergreen branches that just filled the air with that gorgeous pine smell. She would always put out a lot of different scented things, so like the pines, there would also be like cinnamon smells, just really festive Christmassy smells, and this was especially done for her mother Beth. Being blind, of course, she couldn't see these incredible decorations. I'm sure she could imagine it from the Christmases before, but even if she couldn't see the decorations, she could smell it all, she could take it all in that same way, so it's still so vivid for her. And that's what I'm saying, there was always extra effort when it came to this family. They always went the extra mile for each other. She would then tell the stories of the Christmases long ago when Kaye was a child, when her grandchildren were children, and they would say it was almost like Beth was this scrapbook of the family history. Every year she had a new story to tell everyone. And once they were settled inside this cabin, bags unpacked, cosy pyjamas and cosy socks on, they would settle down. Cheese boards, board games, Christmas music echoing throughout. They would have snowball fights in the daytime, followed by hot chocolates in the evening to heat up again. That winter, the winter of 1990, that Christmas, it seemed to hold more significance. Kaye had this thing where she wanted it to be the best Christmas to remember. She wanted her daughters to have a day that they would never forget. And in a very cruel twist, they would never forget this day. So it is 3 days before Christmas, December the 22nd of 1990, the day that these horrific events would take place that no one could ever have imagined. The Tiede family, they decide they are going to go into Salt Lake City. They're going to do last minute Christmas shopping. Kaye's thinking about all the food items that she needs to pick up. It's meant to be a fun day. They hop on the snowmobiles, they drive down the mountain slope for 2.5 miles, they park the snowmobiles, they get in their vehicle, and they head off into town. Almost every single family member has a list in hand. They're like, right, I need to get this, need to get this, need to get this. One of them's probably thinking, I need to do my whole ass Christmas shopping, whereas Kaye's just thinking, have I got the ingredients for the trifle, the pudding, have I organised for the other family relatives to come? Everyone's mind's just going 100 miles a minute, but it's fine because it's Christmas. And usually people get quite stressed, they get a bit angsty and things when it's coming to last minute Christmas shopping. But for this family, it was such a special day. The vibes were immaculate. The car was driving into town, Christmas tunes were blaring. They were just so excited. This was a family who loved Christmas like no one else. They were having such a special day together. But unknowingly and devastatingly, they were completely unaware that this day would be some of their last. Now, they have had a great day, but it has been complete Christmas carnage, like fighting a stranger over the last fleece on the sail rail, that sort of vibe. They can't wait to get back to the cabin, put their feet up, have a hot chocolate, have a break, have a Kit Kat, it's going to be great. So Linae, Beth and Kaye, they decide that they're going to head back to the cabin first, but Tricia and Rolf, they've got some other last minute bits that they need to do. So Linae, Beth and Kaye, they arrive back at the cabin, and Linae, she is desperate to get in to run her hands under a hot tap. She said she was absolutely freezing, her hands were ice cold, she could barely move them. So she's saying to her mum, like, please hurry up, I need to get in, I need to get my hands in some warmth. So Kaye opens the door, Linae sprints inside, she tells her mum, I'll be back in a minute, I'll help with the bags, I just really need to warm up. So Linae, she runs up the stairs, she is running towards the tap, and she stops suddenly because she sees almost this grey flash and it looks like someone is hiding behind the refrigerator. She's thinking to herself at this point, my cousins, like, they must be here early and going to jump out at me, try and scare me or surprise me. But she could never imagine who it was that was truly lurking behind that refrigerator. Because it wasn't a cousin. Because out from behind that refrigerator, there would appear a man, if we can even call him a man, because let's be honest, he's really not. He had really frizzy hair, he was wearing a grey sweatshirt, and he was pointing a pistol at Linae. Suddenly, Kaye, she comes rushing up the stairs trying to see what's taken Linae so long. And then from the back bedroom, another guy with these thick Coke bottle style glasses, he storms out of the bedroom, pointing a gun at Kaye. So now we have Linae and Kaye with guns pointed directly toward them. They are terrified and they have no idea what's about to happen. Now, before we do dive into the horrific crimes that are going to take place, let's talk about these two evil specimens. And honestly, I don't even want to talk about them because they are so goddamn irrelevant, but unfortunately, they are part of this case. So first up, we have this Tiny Tim lookalike contest winner, okay? His name is Vaughn Lester Taylor, and I have to wonder, what's he doing tiptoeing around someone else's cabin? Because surely he should be busy tiptoeing through the tulips. Now, I have to say, I have hunted high and low for information on this scumbag, but let's face it, he is so goddamn irrelevant that no one else could really be that bothered to find out the details either. Sources say that he was born on March the 26th of 1965. Whether he was or not, again, I don't really care. Some sources state that he was deemed to be quite a decent kid growing up. He didn't seem to have much bother. He was from a well-respected family, and then suddenly he gets on the wrong side of good old Johnny Law. And from there, he just fell into a consistent life of crime. This guy, he didn't even know how to behave. Now, at the time that these crimes would take place, he was currently on parole within a halfway house. He had been convicted of aggravated burglary. Now, this halfway house that he was in, he actually left this days prior, and the reason for this was because he was allowed out to try and find employment, to try and get himself a job, try to become a decent human being. This guy, he is completely incapable of such. Because when he's out hunting for a job, he decides, and do you know what? I'm kind of sick of the halfway house. I'm just never going to return. And he violates his parole. He's now a wanted man. And you might be wondering, Anna, why is a scumbag like this up at these nice fancy cabins? Well, apparently he had like a relative who actually owned one of the cabins up there. And I was thinking, oh, okay, I mean, it makes sense why he would go there. Maybe he's, you know, trying to go to a family member for advice or guidance. Wishful thinking from me, because what he was actually doing is he was nope, that's not it either. He was I am illiterate. He was burglarizing. Can we go with, he was burglarizing. Yeah, we're going to go with that. So he was actually burglarizing other cabins within the same area as the Tiede family cabin. And then we have his clueless accomplice, Edward Deli. Edward Deli, tell me why it looks like he got in a fight with a photocopier, because this guy, he just looks like a smudge. It genuinely looks like someone has just like taken their thumb to his face and went, smudged him. Now, his date of birth was estimated around December the 29th of 1968, and apparently he had just been released from the same halfway house that Von Lester Taylor found himself in. Now, when I was looking for his prior conviction, the only one I could find was arson, but I'm sure he was just being a complete monstrosity to society anyway. Now, the two of them, they decide, let's join forces. Let's see what we can find. Let's see what things we can steal and take, because we're low-life scumbags who will never get our own jobs with our own money and buy our own things. So the pair of them, they hitchhike up toward the cabin. Now, it is speculated that Taylor and Deli, they had actually been stalking the Tiede family for multiple days, just waiting on that perfect time to strike. And as I had briefly stated in the beginning, there was that strange guy who was lurking around in the woods, and when he was approached, he got scared off and he took off like a bat out of hell. And people believe now that person was Von Lester Taylor. So on December the 22nd of 1990, these two creepy cretins, they decide they're finally going to burglarise the Tiede cabin. They see the family head out for the day to Salt Lake City, and they try and say that they were just there to rob the family, but they take guns with them, and they also take gasoline. And I know, possibly it's just going to be this armed robbery, point the pistol, get the goods, and take off. But the gasoline, that is where you lose me. In my opinion, these murders were completely premeditated. And I could sit and slag off these two freaks all day long, but let's get back to the horrifying crimes that they would commit. So Kaye, Linae's mother, she starts pleading with the pair. She says to them, listen, take whatever you want. Like, you want money, we'll give it to you. You want items, take them. Anything you want, it's yours. She even offers to write them a check because she didn't have that much cash on her. But these men, they didn't seem to want items or money. They wanted blood. Seconds later, gunshots, they would ring out throughout this cabin. She turns around and she sees that her mother has been shot and fallen to the ground. Her mother is clutching her own chest and she's saying, oh my God, I've been shot. Linae then very quickly looks over to her grandma because there was multiple shots that had rung out. When she looks over to Beth, Beth is on the ground. She has been shot in the head, and Linae heard her grandmother's final gasp for air. Then after that, it was dead silence. Linae then started to pray under her breath. She is begging and pleading with God to save her, help save the rest of her family. And Von Lester Taylor, he hears Linae praying and he says, stop it. It's no good. He told her that he worshipped the devil and that God couldn't help her. And Linae's panicking at this point. She's thinking, I'm going to be next. I'm going to die. This is my last day here on earth. But more than that, she was thinking about the fact that her sister and her father, they have no idea what's happening here. They're going to walk into this. They're going to walk into a death trap. And the idea that her sister and father could walk in and be murdered, this absolutely turned her blood cold and terrified her. She was thinking, I need to get these monsters out of this cabin before they return. So Linae says to him, listen, I'm not going to say anything. I'll say that I didn't see who shot my mum and my grandma. Please just leave. But Taylor and Deli, they tell her, no, we can't leave. There's too much evidence. We need to at least clean this up and get rid of the evidence. And the mess, by the way, that they're referring to, this is the 2 innocent women that they just shot and killed. In their own fricking cabin, mind you. These freaks, they start trying to clean up the blood, they're moving the bodies, they're covering them with blankets and snow to try and hide them and disguise them. But they get tired. There's too much blood. And then suddenly, in the distance, Linae, Deli and Taylor, they hear the snowmobiles approaching. And there is only 2 people this could be at this point in the day. And that is Rolf and Tricia. As these snowmobile sounds grew closer and closer, Von Lester Taylor, he then grabs Linae and he points a gun directly at her. Now, I am going to backpedal ever so slightly for just a second because your gut really does know when something's not quite right. So Rolf and Tricia, when they're still within Salt Lake City, Tricia suddenly gets hit with this really uneasy feeling. She feels like something terrible is either happening or going to happen to her family in that cabin. And she is so dead set that something's wrong that she says to her dad, listen, we need to get back to the cabin right now. We need to find a payphone. We need to talk to them and make sure everything is okay. So Rolf and Tricia, they go to a payphone. They phone the cabin and it rings a couple of times and then suddenly the line goes dead. And immediately Tricia and now Rolf, they think something's wrong. But what they didn't know is back at the cabin when this call came through, Von Lester Taylor, he thought, oh my God, someone actually has the cheek to call this cabin whilst I'm robbing it and murdering people. He gets so aggravated, so irritated that he rips the phone from the wall, killing the line. That is why the line went silent when Tricia and Rolf were trying to call. Now back to the present moment. Rolf and Tricia, they arrive at the cabin, they hop off of the snowmobile and they are determined to get inside to check on everyone. Once they get off the snowmobile, almost immediately, a man in a ski mask comes out from the garage, points a gun at the pair of them and demands that they get inside this cabin. Now when the pair get inside the cabin, they see Linae standing there, tears in her eyes. She is terrified and she has a gun pointed directly at her. Rolf looks at his daughter and he can tell just from that glance that Beth and Kaye, something terrible has happened to them. So Taylor and Deli, they point the gun at Rolf and they demand that he gives money, his wallet, a watch if he's got one, just anything he's got of monetary value. Rolf immediately, he empties his pockets and he throws it all on the floor. He doesn't need that. All he needs is for his daughters to be safe. Once Rolf has emptied his pockets, Taylor turns to Deli and he demands that Deli shoots Rolf dead. So Deli, he points his gun directly towards Rolf. He cocks it, but he can't go through with it. He says to Taylor, I can't do it, I can't pull the trigger. And Taylor, instead of letting this man live, he cocks his gun. He points it at Rolf. He tries to fire twice, but the gun's jammed. And I was thinking at this point, thank goodness, like maybe Rolf can try and overpower them. But then he fires a third time and this shot would go off and it would hit Rolf directly in the head and face. Immediately, Rolf falls to the ground. He's not moving. And from what they can see, it doesn't look like he's breathing. We can't even imagine the terror, the fear and the horror that Linae and Tricia were experiencing at this point. To them, they've just witnessed their mother, their grandmother and their father be shot and murdered in front of them. They're in complete terror. And as they're glancing around this cabin, they start to realise, holy crap, these people, these cretins, these sick sadistic freaks, they've been here for hours. They could see that food had been made. They had eaten the family's food, they had stoked the fire, and they had even opened the family's Christmas presents. What frickin' losers. Taylor and Deli, again, they realise, we've left all of this evidence, we need to get rid of it, so they start dousing the entire home in gasoline. Not only that, but they douse Rolf's body in gasoline as well. In seconds, this cabin that was once a safe space of tranquility, serenity and peace to this family, it was now completely up in flames. So after this cabin starts to go up in flames, the men, they then order Linae and Tricia outside. They're ordering them to get on the snowmobiles, and they're basically going to ride bitch on the back. So Linae and Tricia, they're driving separate snowmobiles, and one of them has Taylor and the other one has Deli on the back. They demanded that the girls drive them down to the main road, so the 2.5 miles, and then they would take the family car and escape, basically. Both of the girls at this point, as much as they don't want to do what these murderous, sadistic weirdos are telling them to, but they had a feeling that they should comply. Driving these men for 2.5 miles, their minds were just going 1,000 miles an hour. They were thinking, should we crash into a tree and, hope that we survive? Should we try and swerve and throw them off of the snowmobiles and drive down to get help? If they could wreck the snowmobiles, could they do it in a way that they will be able to survive and make it to the main road? Now, both girls, they make their way down the mountain and they approach the main gate. As they start approaching the main gate, they see a man waiting there. This man is their Uncle Randy. Their Uncle Randy was just about to make his way up to the cabin when he sees the girls approaching. He's automatically thinking, oh, how nice, Tricia and Linae, they've come down to greet me and maybe give me a baccy up to the cabin. Then he notices there's 2 men accompanying them. So immediately his mind goes to, oh, they've brought their boyfriends, I'll get to meet them, this'll be lovely. But as the girls approach Randy, he starts waving. He's waving, he's yelling, hey, it's me. But the girls completely blank him. They drive right past him, and Randy's thinking to himself, wait, this is weird. Why would they blank me? I'm their uncle. How rude. But the reason that the girls had blanked him is because they believed that if they acknowledged Randy, if they let these men know that this man was someone they knew, his life would be in danger. They would murder their Uncle Randy. Now, Taylor and Deli, they're all paranoid. They want to know who that man was. So when they're asking Tricia and Linae, they say, oh, some random guy, we don't know him, but he must live nearby, I suppose. Now, Randy at this point, he is watching as his nieces continue driving on after completely blanking him, not even looking the road he was on. And he starts to feel like something really terrible is happening here. Now, the girls with the men, they eventually reach the family Lincoln vehicle. At this point, Taylor, he starts loading his gun into the trunk. Linae and Tricia are kind of looking at each other oh, he's disarming himself. Maybe we could escape. However, at this point, Von Lester Taylor, he opens a bit of his jacket and he flashes a knife at them. And he says, oh, don't worry. I'm as good with a knife as I am with a gun. Just that threat to make sure that they don't try anything. Now, the girls, they're forced into the back of this vehicle and the men, they take off driving. Now, this car is driving back towards Randy. And Randy sees the family Lincoln vehicle approaching him and he's thinking, oh, must be the girls now coming to pick me up. Maybe there was just a miscommunication before. But as that vehicle starts to approach Randy, Linae is in the back and she puts her hands up, almost in a stop, don't say anything sort of motion. And at this point, Randy is so confused. What the f is going on here? Why is his nieces acting like they don't frickin' know him? But it would all make sense very, very soon. So Randy's standing, right, and he's kind of dazed and confused because what the hell is going on? And then suddenly he hears another snowmobile approaching and he's thinking to himself, great, what family member is this that's just going to ignore me? Am I not wanted at the cabin? But when he looks, he can see that the person on this snowmobile has no helmet, no gloves, no coat, and is actually bare-chested in freezing weather conditions. And then as this person gets closer, he realises that they're covered in blood, and I mean they are drenched in blood, their entire face. And then as they get even closer, he realises it is his brother Rolf. Rolf, who was shot in the frickin' face and set alight. So Rolf, he is in bad condition. He is in critical condition at this point. And he tells Randy that his daughters have just been abducted off of the same 2 men that have just killed his wife and his mother-in-law. After he is able to tell Randy this, he then collapses to the ground and he's unconscious. Now it turns out back at the cabin when Rolf was shot in the face. He didn't die. I mean, of course he didn't die, Anna. He's just rode into town in a freaking snowmobile. But what he had done is he had played dead the whole time all of this was going on. He was just pretending to be dead because he was hoping that if he survived, he would be able to save his daughter's lives, or at least get justice if he had to. So what Rolf had done, right, is when the men had set the cabin on fire and then they took off in the snowmobiles, Rolf lay on that floor waiting until he heard the snowmobiles go away into the distance. At this point he gets up. But bearing in mind, Rolf was doused in gasoline. He has now caught fire. His snowsuit is on fire. He immediately runs to the bathroom, he jumps in the shower, turns it on, strips himself out of his snowsuit and is able to put out the flames. Now this is why when he rode into town on the snowmobile, he was naked from the waist up. So Randy at this point, he gets his unconscious brother into the vehicle, he lays him down on the back seat and he starts to pursue the family Lincoln. And at this point, he's thinking how Tricia and Linae were thinking earlier with the snowmobile incident. He's thinking, do I run them off the road? Like, how can I make sure that my nieces are safe? But these men, I don't give a crap if they die. Now, the cell service at this point, it is terrible. So Randy is desperately trying to call 911. He eventually gets through and he tells them that he needs a life flight, which is like a helicopter ride to the hospital basically. He says that his brother is dying, he thinks, and that 2 murderers have just abducted his 2 nieces. He tells them that the murderers have taken the family vehicle and he's describing the vehicle to the 911 operator when the line goes dead, because the cell service was lost. Randy decides that instead of pursuing the vehicle, he's going to pull into the gas station and redial 911. Immediately he calls 911 back, he explains who he is, what's happened, and that he needs a life flight immediately. Now Linae and Tricia, they're still in the back of this car, they're holding each other tight, they are terrified, wondering if they're going to survive this ordeal. Suddenly a police car drives by them and they witness as this police car basically does a U-turn on the road and starts to pursue the vehicle. Now Taylor and Deli at this point, they're terrified, they're worried, they think they're going to get caught. They put the foot down on the gas and they're going over 90 miles per hour. They're driving like a pair of madmen. So they turn right and they travel down towards the canyon. They travel another mile or so and then eventually the car falls off an embankment. And when the girls look up, they see that the entire road above them is covered by police, it's covered by concerned citizens who want to make sure that these girls are okay, and every single one of them has rifles, pistols, they have come armed and ready. Obviously at this point the police, they have their guns drawn, okay, but they're not only pointing the guns at the men, they're also pointed toward the girls as well, and this really worries Tricia and Linae. Linae shouts to Tricia and tells Tricia to duck down. Both of the girls, they put their heads down, they're holding each other tight, they are hoping and praying together for the best in this situation. Police at this point, they're able to approach the vehicle and remove these 2 sick freaks because they're cowards, and when the police show up, they want to hand themselves over. They don't want to get shot. They don't want to die like the people that they just murdered did. Once the police have secured the men, they then bring the girls to safety. And Linae at this point, she's shouting at the police, she's telling them, shoot them, kill them. They murdered my mum, my dad and my grandma. Bearing in mind at this point, the girls believe that their father's dead. But because these suspects had suddenly turned into cowards and they were suddenly abiding with the police, they of course wouldn't be shot. Now Randy, he is still waiting with Rolf at this gas station when suddenly a helicopter finally arrives. Like I said earlier, Rolf, he is in critical condition. They don't know if he's going to make it. He's taken from Randy's vehicle, he's placed in this helicopter and he is transported to the nearest hospital. So then the police, they head toward the cabin and the first thing on their mind is they want to make sure that everyone who could be saved had been saved. Secondly, they wanted to make sure that any evidence they could find could be preserved. When police enter the cabin, all they can smell is burnt hair, burnt clothes, and also the smell of burnt skin. When they enter the garage, they would find a 12 to 18 inch pool of blood. As they make their way up the stairs, they see multiple bullet holes in the wall. There was also a smeared bloody handprint like someone had fallen down and tried to hold themselves up. This was like a war zone. It was a thing of nightmares. Then they find 2 bodies, Beth and Kaye. The police, they check for pulses, they check for any sign of life, but unfortunately, it was clear that these 2 women were deceased. The living room floor had been so soaked and completely drenched in blood that when they looked underneath the floorboards, there was icicles of blood. The police at this point, they haven't even realised that the top floor of the cabin was on fire. They wouldn't realise until they stepped into the room and walked into the smoke. Now, immediately at this point, obviously they're thinking about preserving the crime scene, but more than that, they're also thinking about what can they preserve for these family members who have lost their mother, their wife, their grandmother, their mother-in-law. Now, as they're looking through the top floor, they would find a VCR camera, and this was sitting on the coffee table. At this point, they're thinking it probably has family footage, it'll have family memories, precious moments that hopefully one day the survivors can look back on. So they take this from the cabin, and when it's back at the station, they review the footage, and at first, everything seems normal, everything seems as it should be. Family playing board games, drinking hot chocolate, singing Christmas songs. But this would very quickly turn sinister because at one point in this tape, the tone completely switches. On the camera is 2 men, a Tiny Tim lookalike and a smudged fingerprint. It's Von Lester Taylor and Edward Deli. After they have broken into this family cabin, they decided that they were going to create their own home movie. They filmed themselves laughing and joking, eating the family's food and opening up the family presents. It was also stated that the men had even helped themselves to Rolf's clothes and had actually changed into them. They are literally playing house like a bunch of kids. Well, you know, if the kids were the spawns of Satan.
I don't know. Okay. I don't think I got all of this.
How come you got a light flashing on the front of that?
I don't know.
Find out.
How am I supposed to find out?
Read the instructions. And Linae. Come on, pass. Oh, wow.
What is it?
Baseball card.
Okay. Let's see a couple of them.
Oh, there's football and basketball.
Show them this way. Turn them this way. Okay. Next page.
Now, Kaye Tiede and Beth Potts, they would be laid to rest on the same day, 3 days after Christmas. They were both remembered as strong, resilient women who cared so much for the ones that they loved. Kaye was remembered as the perfect mother, the perfect friend, the perfect wife. And Beth was remembered as a mother-in-law who immediately made someone feel at home, and a grandmother who just adored her grandchildren. And whilst this case probably seems as though it should be a slam dunk, I mean, it's not a whodunit, it was, however, a who done what. Both Tricia and Linae, they had stated that both men had equal parts in the murders. There was no man who was more innocent or more culpable than the other. But in the eyes of the law, it wasn't quite as plain and simple. It was actually quite a complex case. Now, the pair, they would be charged with the murders, aggravated assault, kidnapping, arson, high-speed chase, and the rest. Now, around 5 months after the murder, Von Lester Taylor, he would plead guilty to both counts of capital murder, and in exchange for this plea, the state had agreed to drop all the other charges against him. But I just want to be clear, this monster, he didn't plead guilty because it was the right thing to do. He didn't plead guilty because he was remorseful and wanted to give the family peace and closure. He pled guilty because he had no other option. With this evidence against him, he stood no chance. It was stated that Von Lester Taylor was a very evil and sadistic man who took pleasure in the suffering of others. He had no regard for human life whatsoever. And it was stated that you could see the evil in his eyes, the coldness, the callousness. And honestly, this man, this monster, this wild animal, he really is as dumb as they come. Because he thinks that he would stand a better chance at being sentenced in front of a jury instead of just being sentenced in front of a judge. So he goes to his sentencing, and he very quickly realises that he has made a complete doozy of a mistake, because the jury, they would sentence him to death. Twice. 2 death sentences. Now, Edward Deli, he would go to trial just a couple of weeks later, and he truly thought that he stood a chance of a far, far, far lesser sentence. He was saying that he was dragged along. He didn't want to commit the crimes. But unfortunately for him, the prosecution, they came packed with the evidence. Now, at the trial, both Tricia and Linae, they would have to take the stand and depict these murders to the courtroom. And what is just so sickening is these young women, they had to handle the same weapons that murdered their mother and their grandmother. And this is just a whole other level of trauma that they didn't need. But they did it because they would do anything to get justice for the people they love. Both Linae and Tricia, they were deemed to be excellent witnesses. They recounted so much, they had retained so much information and detail from the most traumatic night of their lives. The smoking gun, however, would be Rolf. Rolf Tiede, he would take the stand, and as he entered the court, you should have seen the look on Edward Deli's face. It was like he seen a ghost. But this dead man, he was walking, because he wasn't dead, he was a survivor. He survived and he won, and Edward Deli's face was a picture. Now, it was expected by everyone that Edward Deli would at least receive a life sentence. 1st-degree murder, life sentence, never hear of him again. But somehow, this monstrosity of a person, this human smudge, he was given 2nd-degree murder with life imprisonment. Under this conviction, the death sentence wouldn't be available, and that is what Tricia and Linae so desperately wanted. They wanted these monsters dead. They wanted to take their lives just as they had taken their loved ones. The entire family, they were shocked, they were hurt, they felt let down by the court and the system. And understandably, they had went through these periods of deep anger and frustration. And in 2001, Linae would receive something that would just anger her further, and that was a letter from Edward Deli. Edward Deli had written to her. He claimed that he was remorseful for that night. He said that he had grown into a man and that he was no longer the evil child. Bearing in mind, he was like, 20, 21, 22, something like that. Wasn't a child at all. But he wasn't the same evil little boy who had committed those monstrous crimes. It took 9 years for Linae to build up the strength and the courage to reply to this letter. She read it around 20 to 30 times. She wanted to see for herself, did she believe this man was remorseful? Did she believe he was actually sorry for the pain that he had caused? And 9 years later, she finally replied to Edward Deli, and she told him, I forgive you. And people are always really taken aback by that statement that she chose to forgive Edward Deli. But Linae had stated, I forgive for my own sanity. I forgive so I can move on and live a peaceful life, so I can have this weight lifted off my shoulders, but that doesn't mean I forget. She doesn't believe that Edward Deli is someone who could be released into society. She knows that he is a monster that needs to spend his life in prison. But for her own sake, she had to find forgiveness. Now, later on, Linae, she went on to marry a childhood sweetheart, and they actually had a blended family of 9 children together. That is a huge family. But if anyone has enough love to give to 9 children, it's going to be Linae Tiede. She takes that from her mum, she takes that from her grandmother, and I truly believe she would be life's greatest mother. And Tricia, she had went on to give birth to 2 daughters, and she had said that these 2 daughters are the perfect mix of her mother and her father. The Tiede family, they actually went on to rebuild their cabin. They wanted to still have their special place. These 2 monsters, they maybe took away their loved ones, but they didn't want them to take away the special memories that they all had together. They would go on to fill this cabin with more beautiful family memories, spending more Christmases there, and they said that this cabin felt even better than before. It was magical. It was healing. It helped them through their grief. They finally felt safe and they finally felt peace. And if there was ever a time where they doubted their safety, where they ever worried that something like that could possibly happen again, they would remember their father's words. And he had said, "Lightning never strikes twice in the same location. You're safe." Rolf Tiede, he would sadly pass away from cancer on November the 19th of 2008 in Texas. At the time of his passing, he was surrounded by his loving family. To this very day, Edward Deli, he is still rotting away in his little concrete coffin prison cell. It is very unlikely that he will ever receive parole. Von Lester Taylor, devastatingly, this man is still alive and kicking and I don't know how. He still remains on death row and he is appealing his sentence at every chance he gets. He is desperate. Now at one point he actually had the death sentence revoked, but then I think it was like reviewed and reinstated because he realised you're actually just scum of the earth and we need you evaporated. So he hasn't been executed yet and there isn't actually an execution date in place, but I will definitely be hoping and praying that that day comes soon. But my loves, that is it for this true crime and makeup episode. I really hope I did this one justice. I hope it was new for some of you. I know we're all such true crime fanatics. It's very hard for me to find cases that you don't know about. If you do enjoy my content, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. Share the video if you feel obliged. Any interaction that you can provide with these videos helps boost me out to the YouTube algorithm, helps me reach more people, and it helps me reach my dream of hopefully doing this full time one day for you all. Oh, just to let you know, I have actually turned on channel membership, so you can join that if you like. However, I will say please hold off on joining it because I don't think there'll be any content for the month of September. Although I am thinking that maybe some of my old vlogs, I might republish them in my members only feed just so you can see my life on a more personal level. But of course you will be getting extra true crime content. I just need time to film and get it all uploaded. But I don't want you wasting your money for this month, so please don't join it yet, maybe wait until October. I do want to say, however, like obviously if you want to join channel memberships, that is great, but please never ever feel like you have to spend your money like supporting me, joining the channel memberships. Like, I think of all of you so highly. I love and adore each and every single one of you. And I don't want you wasting your money. If this is something you can't afford, please don't feel like you have to do it. Like, I'm still going to be here twice a week, every single week for you guys. So please don't feel like you have to join the memberships. If it's something you can't afford, please save your money. I don't want you wasting your money on me. Save it for something special. But that is it for today. Any details you need regarding me, myself and I, they will all be listed down below in the description. Don't forget to leave your case suggestions in the comments down below. I read all the comments, they all get added to my list and I eventually get around to them. But that is it for today. Please remember, be a good person. Do not be a bad person. Stay safe, look after each other, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!